In this scenario, we're going to use inter-entity transactions and document management link to automatically create the offsetting loan account entries between companies, with the supporting documentation being available to staff working in both of the companies. We are going to create an AP invoice in Company 1, where some of the invoice belongs to Company 1, Company 2, and Company 3. And we'll add the supporting documentation to the AP invoice in Company 1. Then we'll post the GL batch and see how inter-entity transactions creates the loan account entries in the target company, and that you can still reference the documentation that you attached in AP in the GL in Company 1. And then in Company 2 and 3, we are able to see the GL batch that's being created, debit, expense, credit, loan account, and we still have access to the documents that were attached in Company 1. In this example, I'm going to be working with two companies, Orc Limited, which is Entity 1, this green company, and Orc Inc. 2, which is this blue company. In Orc Limited, I have just received an invoice from our supplier for office supplies and work done for the boardrooms for Orc Limited, Entity 1, Orc Inc. 2, and Orc Inc. 3. And we have the invoice attached here. And we're going to record this invoice in Orc Limited and use inter-entity transactions to automatically distribute $2,000 to Orc Inc. 2 and $3,000 to Orc Inc. 3 via the loan accounts with Entity 1. So first we'll go ahead and enter this invoice. So we've entered this invoice and distributed $5,000 to Entity 1, $2,000 to Entity 2, and $3,000 to Entity 3. And here, using Document Management Link, we are able to attach and view all the past invoices from this supplier. Invoices if we want to file documents away within one company. The purchase order if we want to keep track of the purchase order, the original purchase order to the vendor, and in our case, the folder for Document Management Link to keep track of intercompany invoices. And we have the invoice sitting in our emails. And what we're able to do is drag and drop from our emails into the Document Management Link folder. So I'll just make this a little bit smaller so we can see both screens at the same time. So in terms of filing away the documentation for Document Management Link, if relevant, we can file away the whole email. So if I drag and drop the email into Document Management Links folder, you can see the entire MSG file, including the attachment, has been filed away and renamed based on my rules, which is the vendor number dash the invoice number, which we see on this particular screen that I've already keyed in. But we can also attach just the document if we wanted to. So we can drag the document, the attachment out of the email to file it away for subsequent referral within this company and within the target companies as well as for auditors down the track. And when we go ahead and post this AP invoice batch, from an inter-entity transactions point of view, nothing gets recorded because all the transactions are raised at time of posting the GL batch. So I'm just going to go across to the GL and have a look at that. So whether you've got the GL set to auto posting or posting manually, such as I have, the processing would be the same. And I've got it set to posting manually so we can see what's happening. So as you can see, when we open the batch, we have Document Management Link configured also against the General Ledger batch. And here we can see the attachment that we attached during the AP invoice entry. So just double click and it would open up the email message. And in this case, double click and it would open up the PDF invoice. So as we can see, the AP invoice has created a credit to the vendor control account and debits to the 3 different expense accounts. And the way inter-entity transactions works is when you post the batch in the GL, it will add up the journal entries by entity and ensure that each entity is self-balancing. So in terms of entity 2 and 3, there's a net debit of 2,000 and 3,000, and to entity 1, it's a net credit of 5,000. So all those transactions are out of balance. So inter-entity transactions automatically raises the loan account entries of, in this case, $2,000 between entity 2 and entity 1. So due from 2-in-1's books and due to 2-in-1's books. And then for entity 3, same thing. Due from 3-in-1's books is $3,000 and due to 1-in-3's books of $3,000. So up to here, these IY entries that have been automatically raised are the loan account entries to balance the journal by entity. And then because entity 2 and entity 3 have been configured as target databases, the entries for -2 and -3 accounts are reversed out of the source batch. And if we go across to the target companies, we will see the entries being created in the target companies. There's also a full audit trail showing you that from batch 99, which entry was created in each of the target companies. So if we go and look at the audit trail, so in inter-entity transactions, the inquiries, we have an audit trail. And we see from our source batch number 312 in Orc Inc. 1, we have 2 entries going to Orc Inc. 2, and it's going into batch number 279 in Orc Inc. 2 and batch number 251 in Orc Inc. 3. And when we go across to the target company, we'll just look at entity 2, open up the GL batch. And again, inter-entity can be configured to auto-post these batches, but I've left it to manually being posted. So here we see the debit to the office supplies of $2,000 and the credit to the loan account with entity 1 of $2,000. And from this target company, we can also have reference to double-click and open up the source email message and or the source invoice if any attachment that has been made in Orc Inc. 1. And back in Entity 1, we can configure Document Management Link to show the attachments against the vendor screen, the vendor activity screen, the accounts payable, payment entry screen. So any screen which has the vendor number and or document number, we'd be able to configure to see those documents as well as to see notes. So here we can see on my vendor activity, I've configured to see all my vendor invoices which don't relate to intercompany invoices and all my intercompany invoices. And then when I go onto the transaction screen and I click on a relevant document, you can see in this case it's not an intercompany invoice. It's isolated up here. It is still listed with all the vendor invoices for checking across all invoices, but here's the individual one. And when I highlight that invoice that we've just entered, you can see I'm seeing all my intercompany invoices as well as the documentation that I attached at the time of the invoice creation. So both the email message and the individual PDF. So Document Management Link can be configured to show the attached documents on any screen which contains the vendor number, and if you want to isolate the document number as well.